Riverside Corona San Bernardino chapter of the California Native Plant Society. And today is a program where Orchid Black will be presenting, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. And we're also having a social. So we have some people here in the room today, as well as those of you who are online. So welcome to our hybrid presentation, and it's in person and online. We have been dark for meetings during the summer period, and we're back starting today, marking the end of summer and the beginning of fall, our fall season. So hopefully we're through the hottest, horrible period of the summer. And I know we have a heat wave coming up, so just take care of your plants and your gardens, and also be sure to prepare your yards for the possibility of fire and the spread of fire. That's become just way into people's minds right now, and there are various community groups getting together to try to figure out how to be more fire resilient. CNPS has a great website. The website there's a link to the website on the MailChimp flyer. It's not in my head right now, but if you go to cnps.org, the main website, you'll be able to eventually find a page that's dedicated to issues with fire. It has a great publication. We have some hard copies at the back, and also a lot of guidance about how to landscape for resilience. And we have Orchid Black here today, who is a landscape designer. She has a website which she'll show you when she comes up, which has a lot of great information and handouts on it, so that you can go to her website to get some of the handouts as well. So I welcome you, and I'm just going to get going and let Orchid come up and give her presentation on landscaping for fire resilience, and that's with native plants, of course. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. And we have a bunch of people online. People online, please put your city in the chat where you're calling in from. And if you've seen any great plants lately, please put that there also. And so I am gonna share my screen now. And there we go.
Katie put the link to the website in the chat.
Oh, that's great of her. So
to the CNPS.
Oh, okay. So the link to the CNPS website is in the chat, and I'm gonna copy the link to my website and put it in the chat also, so that you can see here that that I have the handout. I turned my JavaScript off so you can't actually see the handouts, but they are there. There's one on fire gels. There's one on the harden your home, and there's a couple of other useful things there. So let me get back. Let me go to, let's see. So that's nativesanctuary.wordpress.com. And I'm gonna pause that share for a minute so I can go to the. Okay, thank you. And paste that there. So that's where you can get the handouts. I would have brought handouts, but I have a new printer and I just do not care. And so here we are. And so I developed this talk for the Theodore Payne Foundation about 6 or 7 years ago, maybe 2019. And I gave it several times, and in the beginning, it was really, I'll,
Sharing on the webinar.
okay, thank you. Seems, let's see. And now, am I sharing on the webinar? Ak. Okay. Let's try that one again. Is it sharing now? Okay, yay, thank you, tech people. So we love Zoom because people can be anywhere and come in and but it does make the experience in the room and on Zoom less than perfect when we try and do both things, but we like to see your faces, so we do try and do both things. And let me just go ahead and hide these meeting controls because I don't care anymore. And I do care about fire. My cabin is in the woods and my partner's home is my cabin has been a quarter mile from the fire. And only the latest fire technology stopped it from being a crispy critter. And also landform, which matters when you're choosing a house, which I didn't get to choose this house. My partner's little shack is in a canyon as well that has that canyon has been on fire more than once. So I'm intimate with this as an idea. And one day I gave this talk while the fire was really close and the helicopters are going overhead and the sky is all orange. And I'm like, I believe this. And so here we go. So one of my pet peeves is the news media. And I know there's nothing we can do about them. I know. But I just want to remind everybody that the fire is so hot, the ground has been sterilized is just a bizarro statement that they like to repeat that has just very little to do with the science of fire. And so I took a few post-fire pictures. This is Crystal Lake. And you can see the burned trees and you can see how the ground was so sterilized that nothing would grow there. Except lemon lilies and helianthus and monkey flowers. And so it turns out that the various substances, smoke and the leachate of water leaching through ashes and cinders actually stimulates plants to grow, and that some plants are grown. I was at a seed talk last week with Antonio Sanchez, and they also use liquid smoke to germinate some plants. Some of you are like, yes, and others of you are like, what? And in fact, this is even used to the detriment of native plants in Australia, where they'll water heavily, bring up all the plants using liquid smoke, and then herbicide them to death so they can do agriculture. So don't do that. But you can, there's plenty of things that do better if you light them on fire. And let's see a few more. So this was a San Bernardino Mountains trip. And just stunning. This was not the best camera, but still it was amazing to just stand here amongst the burn, this and that, seeing all these flowers. And then some, yeah, like capitata and other things. And I thought this was just stunning. And in fact, there's plenty of people who are fire chasers. They'll go and see where the fires were and go there the next year. So, right, exactly. So lots of people, right? And amazing things come up that you would not see otherwise. And so, and this is one of my favorites. This is Dendromecon rigida post-fire. And so we want to think about this And we will talk about zones, but this is this great zone 3 stump sprouting, resprouting plant. It also seeds heavily, and the seeds come up a lot after fire as well, as we saw in the station fire. So fuel breaks. So humans like to be doing something, and the thing that we hate the most is to just be powerless in a situation. And so thus we got all kind of bad behaviors like seeding rye, seeding mustard. Much of that was post-fire seeding. Some of it was agriculture, but a lot of it wasn't. And the other thing we like to do is like, okay, well, we'll just cut some lines and that will stop the fire. So it turns out that was studied, and I know this because the San Gabriel CMPS did a comments on a project in Santa Clarita where the county was going to cut just random fire breaks through the coastal sage scrub and chaparral out there. And so we commented that we thought that that was probably not going to work based on these studies. And so fuel breaks, turns out, only really work as firefighter access. You cut fuel breaks indiscriminately, what you get is indiscriminate flashy fuels. So you get mustards and you get grasses, and what you do not get is stopping the fires. So I try to bold the important parts. So fuel breaks will not stop fires without firefighter presence. So you can't distribute firefighters throughout the forest during a fire or throughout the wildlands during a fire. So constructing fuel breaks in remote backcountry locations will not save houses. Some fires are going to burn and we're not going to get them out. And so most firefighters will be needed to protect the wildland urban interface, and fires will not be stopped by those fuel breaks that are located farther away. So if they want to cut some fire lines near houses, that's fine. If they have a plan to stage firefighters there, they're just doing that in the hope that that will work. That's just that's a fun hope. And kind of an idea of we're doing something when we're really not doing something. And so again, comparing the role of fuel breaks, it only helps when they facilitate fire management. And so they should only be near the wildland urban interface, which is to say those houses that are planted where they shouldn't be. Don't look at me. But we could do better with our housing policy, and this would be 4 hours long if I really got into all the issues, so I'm not going to. But we have also been discovering over the last few years, and early into COVID, we had a speaker whose name I forgot, who was working on this, but other people have been working on it, is that weather determines fire behavior. Tree density does not determine fire behavior. And so this is the exact opposite of what CAL FIRE has been doing forever. And so, and in fact, sometimes tree density can help because it breaks the wind. So if you open things up so the wind can come through, you might be asking for more fire instead of less fire. But that involves doing nothing, and we don't like to do that because being human and all. So so this is, of course, the big scary picture. But this is what wind-driven fires look like from space. And if we think about that for a while, we start to realize that that's just not very modifiable, you know. And so, in particular, cutting large fuel breaks is not going to modify that. So this is a thing about the veg treatment program, and we did already comment extensively as a chapter on this, but it is ongoing, and now CMPS is working hard on trying to document whether it has worked in every place where fuel breaks have been put. So a lot of this happens on private land. CAL FIRE gives private contractors who know nothing about botany to go out and do treatment on private land. But one thing to think about here is 9 out of 16,909 fires in California during 2017 and 2018 caused 95% of the damage. So their fires happen all the time, but they don't really have huge effects on the built environment unless they are wind-driven fires. And CAL FIRE acknowledges that the vegetation treatment will not be effective during wind-driven fires. Now, that's just, they should just go home and think about their sins. That's all I'm saying. Okay, did I say that? On YouTube? Okay, we need to focus on making communities themselves fire resistant and fire resilient. And so I am going to go through some real basic of, thoughts about clearing. And the biggest thought that anyone ever showed me is that the flame height of a single shrub is 2 times the shrub height. And so this really is going to matter later on when we think about this, but I want to introduce it early. So we have a 6-foot shrub that's 12 feet. So even if we have our house over here 6 feet away, that flame can bend right over and touch that house. So you don't want a 6-foot shrub that's closer than 6 feet to your house. And in general, we don't want tall shrubs near the house at all. So, and we look and we see that the flame height on this 3-foot shrub doesn't, just barely makes it to 6 feet. So if it bends over, it's only going to bend over that 3 feet. Now, in wind-driven events, that can be farther. But that is our rule of thumb, and we will go to the next thing, which are the CAL FIRE pictures. So I really feel like this is more of a forest-oriented set of pictures. And I would say that the most important part of this picture is the fire ladder thing, where you have a shrub under the canopy of a tree without adequate clearing, so that the fire can just go straight up as a ladder, they say. And then they have in order that if it was 2 times the height of the shrub, that gives you 3 more shrub heights here. But I would say that this between here needs not to be bare ground. That needs to be planted. And the same between the trees. Now, sometimes you can't, because between the trees, it's just too dark to plant there. But it's surprising where if you remove the crappy grass and other weedy stuff, it's surprising how the native vegetation will bounce back between trees, even though it's dark. So things like to grow. And then I'm not really going to go through this at length, but to see that the steeper the slope, obviously, fire likes to go uphill, the more your distance between things, but you still would need something. I need to redraw these. Okay, next time. Yes, you need to, exactly. You also need to hold the soil. So, and then the actual defensible space needed. So the defensible space really started in like my grandparents' era, where they just weed whacked and raked. And I spent the last 20 years fixing those errors and allowing native plants to come back up. And there was a reason for that. And the reason was that people did have big shrubs right next to their houses, and the houses would go on fire, would ignite just because of radiative heating. So we'll see about that. But people have studied that now, and between 5 and 20 meters or 16 to 58 feet, that's just not that far. That's the effective clearance zone. And distances larger than 30 meters do not help. Doesn't help to clear past that. And so the insurance companies, also being human, keep thinking that if they just required people to clear more, that's going to work. But it doesn't work. As we can see, that cleaning to bare soil can hasten embers to your house via laminar flow. So we love these big laminar flow words, and Greg Rubin was an aircraft engineer before he became a native plant contractor. And so he knows whereof he speaks when laminar flow. And so basically, if you don't have, you clear the ground, you're just making kind of a bowling alley where the wind can stick to the ground and hasten the embers to the house. So these pictures are available on Calone. You can download them yourself. I'm not even sure I told Greg that I did this. But the notion, I'm just going to read this. I know it's wrong to read your slide, but the notion that if 100 feet of defensible space is good, then 200 to 300 feet must be better is false. Creating large areas of clearance with little or no vegetation creates a bowling alley for embers without the interference of thinned, lightly irrigated vegetation. And we're going to talk about that. How do we make a green belt around the house? And then when a fire hits a bare fuel break or clearance area, a shower of embers is often released. I did go to that study, but I really got lost in kinds of embers and really couldn't get any farther than that. Sorry. But it's there if you want to go there. So there's 3 common types of ignition. There's radiative ignition, hot gas ignition, and embers. So radiative ignition, this is a story that my partner told me about a house with a tile roof and firewood stacked up against the house. I know when it gets cold, we start stacking, having that firewood not 30 feet away, you know, especially in the snow, you're like, I don't want to do that. Okay, but the fire was on the ridge, so not even close to the house. It was far enough away that men could still be there working at the house. But they had radiative heat from the fire nonetheless. And even though there was men and hoses, I mean, they didn't have firefighting hoses and they didn't really see this coming. So they had to deal with it as it happened. But the logs caught fire, not from embers, from radiative heat. The heat of the fire was enough to cause, you know, well-dried logs to just go on fire. Now, when I'm trying to start a fire in a cold stove, I always wonder why this is not the case for me. But in fire, so not only that did the logs catch on fire, but there was no fire stops in the tile roof. And so the fire went straight from the log into the roof. And the people came home and, you know, their house is wet, half of it is charred, stuff like that. So don't do that. Then there's hot gas ignition. And this is a challenging one because many attics need venting, but there are better venting products than this. So what happens is your hot gases go right up through the vent into your attic and erupt from the inside. We do not want this. And then hot gas ignition is also one reason you need soffits. And then ember ignition. I hope everyone likes my goofy pictures. And so embers are pushed along the ground and they just kind of roll like this, like those cartoons of people fighting. They roll right to the house and they stop. And then if they can catch anything on fire under the eaves, they will catch the eaves on fire. Sometimes they just go right up to the eaves and catch them on fire. So making smooth eaves is important, and we'll see about that. One of the best landscaping things I ever saw, and I wish I had pictures of this, but those pictures are gone, is a low wall as fire defense. It was a landscape designer where I learned much of what I'm teaching you now. And she had a seat wall, you know, just like 30 inches where you could just perch on it all the way around the house, about 6 feet away. So the embers, if they come, and she lives in Murrieta, so they probably will come, stop there. They don't make it under the eaves. And I urge you all to do this. So then I was looking at my foundation, and you can see that I have not cleared, but this is very light amount of stuff. And I do rake that portion and I do clear somewhat. But the old-fashioned foundation, this is, it's hard to tell, but it is about 2 feet high. So if the embers come, they will not hit the siding directly. So those people had a plan as well. Not bolted to the foundation, so they didn't have a total plan. but they had a plan. And so, you know, where to harden the house? Well, we'll talk about that. And so then, because most homes burn from flying embers, yeah, so we stopped the radiator burning more or less, but we can't really stop the embers. And so the basics are hardening the structure. So when I was in Girl Scouts, we were all in Girl Scouts, right? They honorary Girl Scout. And they showed us how to make a fire in the shape of a house. And that's what most people's houses are, a fire in the shape, you know, a fire in the shape of a house that they haven't made another plan for. So do not attach the storage shed to your house, you know, put it far enough away so that you could deal with that. We will we of course cannot burn here. A couple things people don't think about: make sure that a garden hose is already attached. Don't put your hoses away until the last antenna is done. Keep your driveway access visible. Firefighters can choose which house to save. Are they going to go under the burning tree to get to your house when that house does not have burning trees to negotiate? They're not going to. They're going to save the house they can save. So clean and screen your chimney, clean your gutters. Your wood pile is got to be at least 30 feet from your house. Mow crappy vegetation that ideally you all no longer have cheatgrass around your house or mustard. Okay, well, I don't know, you know, it's a lecture, so I get to lecture you. and says thin and prune coniferous trees. Well, they mostly thin themselves, but you have to prune the lower branches that die back. So you do have to get up at least 6 feet and limb up your branches. So this is in the handout. So I'm not going to go through all of it. I am going to talk about the fire gel or frost check. You can buy this. That's about $500. And that's they say there's never money for the medicine, but there's always money to pay for the funeral. And you know, you can spray your own house. You spray the roof, you spray the windows, and then the deck. So windows implode from heat, and I saw demonstrations of the barricade gel, and when I could afford it, I got some, and it's in my house right now. Have the open driveway, we talked about that. Fire resistant roof, metal remains the best. I really think the whole old-fashioned wavy galvanized roof should come back. I mean, you know, we always love a standing seam, but that's expensive. Class A rating on asphalt shingle. So the only thing that gives that asphalt shingle a Class A rating is the rocks on top, that little gravel. Right, yeah, and that stuff starts wearing away with the first rain. And so my partner, who is identified here as local contractor, said it's only Class A on the day it goes in. So when you can afford it, if you live in fire country, you need to have a metal roof or at least fiber cement tile. Do not think that a asphalt shingle is going to be okay, because it's not going to be. Add soffits, we'll talk about that. Sheetrock layer is part of the code of that. There are fire excluding vents. You can still have vents and they melt when it gets too hot and they exclude the fire. Use fire stops on tile roofs. Everyone should have that by now. I took this picture of an uncleared gutter in the neighborhood, in my partner's neighborhood, but I just thought I wouldn't show it. Right. Well, so if I didn't have a personal relationship with the people, it would be better. And then of course, connecting the hose. And then I have a client who the insurance would not insure their new construction without them putting in fire truck parking. And so the only fire truck parking on their street is at their house. So you want to make your house as friendly to the fire trucks as it can be. So I'm going to go very quickly over boxing in the eaves, and here's a nice little picture of that the embers don't get stuck there. We're not going to spend a lot of time, but I want to show you what unboxed eaves look like. And a closed eave. This closed eave from UC A&R still has a vent. And then, I was like, well, they're ugly, but a quick image search shows that many of them can be very pretty. So, and there's modernistic ones as well. I feel this one is not good because it has places that could trap embers. And then here's a picture of the fire gel, comes in a box. You just put the hose on the end like the old-fashioned fertilizer style. You do not have to have an applicator, and you don't have to know how to do it. You can buy and it can be re-wet by the fire people. So that's important. You gel and you leave. There are also very inexpensive homeowner, you can put it in roof sprinklers. So no one really has, in other countries, they require roof sprinkler systems. That we don't have that is like, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder about us. Like, oh, well, it'll be good for the construction industry when everything burns. Okay, yeah, maybe not. Metal or masonry fences. Fences are great. Yes, go ahead. Yes, their purpose is to wet the roof. They get to about 30 feet, so it depends on how big your house is. But that particular one comes with 2 sprinklers. Each of them have about a 30 feet diameter, depending on your water pressure. But mostly their job is to wet the roof. You should have already made sure that your landscaping is wet, and we'll see how to do that.
So that's recommended using it to cover roof like a tile.
It's amazing how hot things can be. If I had a tile roof, I would do it nonetheless. Go ahead.
How long does the fire gel?
If you
Weeks before fire?
No, you have to do it like that day, maybe the night before if you're pulling out, and trust the firefighters to re-wet it. I would leave something that tells them it's there. And then oversized wood. So don't use little sticks. Use 4x6s instead of 2x4s, and 6x6s instead of 4x4s. I know this is expensive, but again, where do you want to spend your money, now or later? And change things out little by little. There is silica treated wood. I haven't found it. I know one person who found it. Did you want to say something about that? Yeah, sources are difficult. Yes, Ellen Mackey. Yes, she had it. That's where I saw it. And then so metal deck railings are becoming common in my neighborhood in the mountains. All new railings are metal. No one's putting in wood. And fiber cement decking. My partner looked at my deck and he's like, you need to change this to fiber cement when you can. Looks like wood. Yes, go ahead.
There's that artificial wood that's kind of mixed with plastic and
Yeah.
probably not very high.
No, no. Fiber cement is really the thing. And there's fiber cement siding also. So it's up to us not to have a fire in the shape of a house. Basically, just because we've always done it a certain way and it was the cheap way doesn't mean it's the right way. And then you can baffle fences. So one source of ignition is the embers come around and light the fence on fire. So we can put a little baffle to make that not happen. If you know the prevailing winds, and remember, it's the Santa Ana winds that we're talking about, not the main winds. So they usually come from inland, but these also are coming up slope. So you have to think about your landform. And then we have new zones. And so zone 0 is the place where we is now that 5 feet where instead of having foundation plantings, we might have gravel or concrete or something else. And this is from the CMPS fire manual, fire recovery manual, I think, which is free online. And then here's a couple of other thoughts about zones. So that 0 zone, then the 5 to 30 feet zone, which is zone 2, and then 30 to 100 feet. And actually, so 0 feet, then zone 1, then zone 2. And then everything outside the box is zone 3. And then we have again some more fire zones, which I'm not going to belabor. And then green belts versus thinning. So I met a new landscaper in Sierra Madre last night, and she said, oh yeah, she did lots of work on woody thinning in Sonoma County on estates. And I didn't put my head onto the counter. I just smiled and I was like, sounds great. And I made a little pitch for wet green belts because I am that way. So what are we looking for? We're looking for lightly irrigated native shrubs and low plants planted around homes. So this is from Keeley et al. 2020. So the thinking about this has changed. And here's why. So we have these hot embers, and we could speed them to the house by clearing that to the house, or they could land in something wetter where you can catch them and defend the house against them before they reach the house. So as they go over these shrubs may be sacrificial, but they cool the embers down. So they're cooling the embers, and then the embers can be trapped. And this is also, of course, the case with your oak trees. Many embers go into oak trees and they burn part of the oak, and that rest of the oak is fine. And oaks are your fire protection if you live in an oak woodland. So here's what's called the miracle house, but you can see they have a watered green belt around their house. I don't know what was around their house farther than their watered green belt, because we don't have a before picture, but we can see that their house made it. And so that's what we're trying to do, make a watered green belt. And when I started this, Arlie gave me a bunch of fire, burn lists, and I diligently read them. And where I got stuck was that they were all about drying down plants and putting them in furnaces and seeing how fast they would ignite. And that's just not a real world situation.
They also, the other way.
Yes, yes, right.
It's hydrated versus not hydrated.
Right. And so what we're looking for is what she was saying is also time to burn, whether it's hydrated or not hydrated. And those were all mostly in, plants and pots. But what we're looking for is to hydrate the plants, and native plants can be hydrated on much less water than non-native plants. And so we're looking for well-watered, low-profile plants close to the house. We're looking for less watered, mixed profile plants farther from the house. So not a smooth bowling alley, not even grass. And then we're looking for resprouting, fire-resistant native shrubs outside of the irrigated zone to minimize erosion if burned. So the fire may come, but you want to leave your resprouting plants outside in the outside zone, in that zone 3. So we're not going to go deeply into zone 3 because most people don't landscape zone 3. It's just a thought about what do you want to keep growing there. And then a surprising number of fire safe plants on plant lists are fire prone in their native region. So I went through a lot of plant lists when I first was developing this. And what I found is that plants like cistus and those acacias from Australia are part of fire regimes in the Mediterranean and in other Mediterranean climates. And what people had done was just put drought tolerant plants on the list and decided that if they weren't native, they would not burn. And, you know, again, head to desk. So, so list, you know, there's just not much you can do with people who want to live by the list. You cannot help them. And sadly, a lot of times it is the firefighters who think that. And re-educating people who were told something and their job depends on it, it remains difficult. So, but go thou and do it. And then for dummies, okay. No foundation shrubs, duh. Trees cannot overhang your house. Your insurance company will come and make you do, you know, get rid of your overhanging trees. Get rid of the annual grasses and mustards. They are your flashy fuels and they can go on fire just by themselves. Heavily composted mulch turns out to be the best in the University of Nevada trials, but they did not test redwood mulches. Greg Rubin does have pictures of redwoods smoldering, but not bursting into flame and not catching anything else on fire. Yeah, it's the gorilla hair. It wasn't in the one that I was looking at. Yes, please do. So in the pictures that he has, the hose is scorched, the landscape flags are scorched, but the house is still there and the landscaping. So redwoods, turns out, do not really want to burn. That's not their point. So prune out twiggy growth. So I took this picture and then I went back. I took this picture after I had pruned out the twiggy growth in this ceanothus in front of the cabin. And and then I looked at that, I looked at the picture and I went back out with my pruning shears and did a much better job. So it can be very, it can trick you. It looks like it's open, but it's not. And those little growths are what goes on fire because they die off, they die back. And so they don't have sap running through them anymore. And you can tell that by feel. Anyone who's ever asked me if a plant is dead did not touch the plant. And you do not have to scrape the plant either. You can feel it, it's cooler. Okay, so zone 1, the garden zone. Zone 2, the defensible space zone, and zone 3, the transition zone. So I talked about that a little bit with those other pictures, but we're going to talk about zone 1, well-watered plants that tolerate moisture. So even some desert plants tolerate more moisture than some of our coastal sage scrub plants, it turns out, because they're used to being hot and wet in the monsoon season, or our broadleaf or succulent leaves. So we're not looking for fine foliage close to the house. Oaks, sycamores, and deciduous trees such as maples and fruit trees. All of these plants only are fire retardant if you water them heavily. And so do not let your plants dry out, please, especially in fall. Put the annoying leaky faucet on all night. So yeah, so heavily watered means that you water deeply overnight for your trees. You know, not just for an hour today. Usually about a month. And so one day I'm going to get a gold star from Arlie, but not today. So what I do is I take my hose, I put it on the annoying leaky faucet, which is when the drip is no longer a regular. And then I put it on all night, or sometimes 2 nights. I get to a client's house where they stop watering their lawn, so they stop watering their trees. This is just a bad day for me. But I get out the faucet and I just turn it way, way down. And you're like, the water bill. Okay, your dad is not here anymore. And if he is, just, you know, point him back at the television or whatever. Or, you know, go out to whatever his interests are and turn on the faucet all night. Okay, then, yeah, did you have a question? They can be within your defensible zone. Oak trees are fire retardant. they are the water pump for the ecosystem. Yeah, you can't have trees overhanging your house. But other than, I mean, okay, I do. We have an oak tree in the house. But if you've ever seen an oak tree be cut, water pours out of them. And I drove up the 18 after the old fire, and I would see an entire oak tree with just one little scorch on it. Now, the old fire was a huge crown fire that decimated, you know, vast amount of acreage, and yet there would be an oak tree with just a little bit of scorching. So yes, they can be. Oak trees are the water pump for your ecosystem and everything else. Go ahead. That is reasonable, and you're not gonna win that. But
I just wondered if it was better than some other things.
insurance companies are not biologists. They're kind of anti-biologists. Yeah, no plants. Yeah, exactly. They don't really think about oak trees and why oak trees are sacred. And okay, I'm not going there. So
Orchid,
yes, go
Orchid,
ahead.
excuse me. Can you please repeat the questions when they're asked from the audience?
I'm so sorry. Yes, so
No worries. Thank you.
I will try, but probably I will forget. I get so frustrated with other speakers, and then I don't do it myself. So plants should have lower fuels and be regularly watered. So we will see some of these plants as well. And then extensive low ground covers. Trees and shrubs are isolated by 2 times their height, like we saw before. And then the transition zone of zone 3 is more fire resistant plants, not fire retardant plants, and unwatered plants which will re-sprout after a fire. And so that's outside your irrigation. That's if you have acreage. I'm not treating them in the case studies that we will see. And these plants should be plants which re-sprout after fire are the plants that provide the best erosion. I mean, we have plenty of fire obligate cedars among these, and not that you should take them out, but that they won't provide your erosion protection. And so there are stump sprouting ceanothus and manzanitas and coffeeberry species and dendromecan species.
Right.
And toyon and right. And so, but this is not treating that, but there are plenty of plants that do this. And so you want to identify them and keep them and don't let people cut them out, because you will need them if you have a slope. And then plants such as melasma, the fire department often wants you to cut them down, but since they can get to easily 15 to 20 feet, living them up is much more effective. And they are also water pump. They can have roots that go 40 feet deep. So you do not want to remove your melasma, however much the fire department wants you to, unless it's right at the house. And then you can cut back Artemisia to the ground and it will come back. And we have done this in places like I have a site that was near the station fire, and when the station fire lit on fire, we went around and cut them all down. Bart O'Brien says this is an awful thing to do because the pollinators need it, but you know, in my view, when the pollinators are burning, I'm not going to worry about them as much as the house. Chamise is another thing that should be modified somewhat. And then so our case studies for zone 1 and 2 are Eden Canyon. I want to call your attention to the roof and how they did not box in the eaves, because it's that classic craftsman look that they were going for, and that included these heavy beams and the open eaves. And I feel bad for this because this is the post fire. This is the new one after the old one burned, the new nature center. So I look at that and I just go, okay, well, sometimes things just serve as a bad example, but it has not burned since. And so, but what do we see here? We see low ground cover varieties of some of our shrubs. So it does still look nature-like, but we can see that we have our low buckwheat and our low form of Artemisia, the Canyon gray. We have some excellent currants here. And I forget what was over here. Might have been a bladder pod. So, but everything is low. And then as we get to the structure, they have an entirely watered zone of riparian plants. So we have scarlet monkey flower, and we have Salvia spathacea, and we have the Lictrum. So plants that are heavily watered. Now, most people would advise that this should be just concrete, but they made this other decision, and there are people in the Wildfire caucus of CMPS that still think that you can have well-watered plants right close to the house. For this same kind of ember trapping reason. And then we come to ground covers. So this is a low salvia, maybe Mrs. Beard, or Gracias. So, it's only 18 inches high at most, but 6 feet wide. And there an endless amount of this type of thing. So we're talking about just choosing structure of how we do it. And this is not a plant list. This is just think about the structure of the plants and what you're doing here. So yes, sages can burn. If it ignites, that flame height is going to just be, from here to here. It's not going to be much more than some other shrubs would be by themselves. So then we have some bladder pod out at the back, and then we see I think a melasma in the distance. And they have this beautiful amount of solanum. No one else's solanum looks this good, and I don't know why. And then here's a house in Altadena that was on the Theodore Payne tour many times. So again, riparian plants, or this is a mix of Carex panza and Festuca molate. John Greenlee did the meadow. And then again, the meadow around the house, and some plants that can be very well watered against the house. And then going from the meadow up to low ground covers. So I think it was Dana Point buckwheat, and wayside Arctostaphylos, and some prostrate coyote brush and giant wild rye, which we do pull out the brown stuff out of the wild rye, and we do that out of deer grass as well, especially at this season. So again, the prostrate coyote brush, the prostrate Arctostaphylos in zone 2. So this is zone 2 where you have low ground covers. And then a maple, a well-watered maple. And then here's a different meadow, again in Altadena. This was originally a Theodore Payne garden. I've gotten to work on a few. And we have a whole riparian area over here, and then we have a whole meadow over here of mostly Carex praegracilis. And the landform is actually a meadow. This is where the water flows before it goes off the property. And then very low plants near the house. So this is, the perspective is funny because this is a margarita bop and it really isn't as big as it looks. But we have, again, the low ground covers close to the house, Canyon gray, Artemisia, and probably again Bruce Dickinson. You can see that I have some favorites in plants, plants that are reliable, plants that live a long time, and plants that have the right structure. And a different view of that with the buckwheat wrapping around, and then some other fancier plants closer to the street. And out of frame is a huge open driveway of really expensive rock. Gravel. And then so zone 1 plants. So red fescue, this is really better in Northern California, but some people still love it, and you can buy it in huge bags of seeds. So blue grama grass will grow anywhere, you know, from the low desert to 8,000 feet on south facing slopes. And then Carex pragracilis, one of my favorites because it is a run-ring sedge, and this lawn at this time is 6 months old. So, and then the oak tree became very happy when we took out the lawn and put in the sedge. Amazing. You'd think it's almost the same plant, but it's really not the case. And we're not go into that. And then Agrostis palens is now being sold. My contractor has worked with that, and they say that it's better as part of a mix and not as a lawn by itself. It takes more water than you would think to make a lawn out of it. One of my favorites is Phyla naudiflora. It has some funny names, but it's perfectly flat, and it gives you that kind of, when people want the really flat grass, this works really well, and it grows in the shade too. And it's foot tolerant, so you can walk on it, use it between pavers, use it right where people get out of the car. It's super useful plant. You can buy it in flats. And skippers like it because of these cute little flowers. And oh yeah, that's funny. So here, at a distance, I thought that this was just some crabgrass or Bermuda grass cut really short, and when I got up close, I saw that it was Lipia. So then deer grass can be watered, but it must be pruned out, and in the fall you can cut it, you know, to 4 inches and mow it down. And that allows it to renew itself, and native people would burn it to get the tillers for a basketry. And one of my clients, who's a biodiversity person at JPL, he did burn his deer grass, but he invited the fire department and he put it inside of a 55-gallon drum. And yeah, it was a whole thing. I'm sorry I missed it. But you can get the same effect really by just pulling out the dead stuff and clipping it low. And now, you know, October is a good time. Most of this fire prep and pruning can be done now. Now to, you know, Thanksgiving. So Lamus again can be fully watered. And you do have to clean it out. Succulent leaved plants are good around the house. Seaside daisy can be watered also, and it's slow and cute. And I'm not going to go too much into that. And some buckwheats. Buckwheats have been tested mostly at Las Politas, who took blow torches to all the plants, and they said there's not enough there for buckwheat to carry flame. So they do ignite, but they burn themselves out quite quickly. And so rosy buckwheat, coyote mint is low, and it smells great. I don't really know how we got that many coyote mints. It must have been a long planting dip. And again, that same solanum and Achillea, another excellent, you know, zone 1 and 2 plant. Columbine can be fully watered. All the dudleas, of course, most of them really, this is in shade. Fragaria, one of my favorites, very easy plant, and I don't know why people don't, you know, have more of this. You know, but this is in Pomona, right? This lawn is in Pomona. It's in the shade, but it's in Pomona at BioTrek on Cal Poly Pomona. And then Douglas Iris, this is a slope in Studio City that was also on the tour, not my garden, but I did some advising. So iris stays green, our native iris, so that also is a choice. So we're looking for plants that stay green, that can be hydrated, and that are low in height. So go down and find those plants. No, I'll keep showing them to you. And but you know, it's not just turn right here, turn left here. You have to know where we're going. And so here's what they look like when they're not flowering, and they still look good. Coral bells, another plant that can be watered surprisingly amount. And they still look good when they're not watered. Or not flowering. And then a lot of people ignore this plant, but it makes a great shady location ground cover. Chaparral honeysuckle. And here it is young. And then the sticky monkey flower, because it's not that tall, although you do need to keep it more hydrated than it wants, which is sad. And the evening primrose is a dune plant. But it is an amazing bully and a nice low ground cover. And my friends on the mountain would wait for the flowers to open at around 4 or 5 o'clock with their beverage of choice. So that's how you know you're hanging out with absolutely the right people. and so it is nicely spreading and sadly hard to find. Salvia spathacea, again, a nice low plant that can be watered. And Point St. George aster, some people weed this out. If nothing will grow for you, you could get this plant. Actually, I like to keep it in pots because plants like it, or it grows in those rock piles. It's very happy in rock piles. Snowberry. Snowberry does not have a lot of leaves in summer unless you keep it watered. But it is pretty. And then our sycamore, so a little tour through trees, western sycamore, which is a riparian tree. Coast live oak, we all should know this plant by now, hopefully. Canyon live oak, one of my favorite oaks, looks different everywhere. But again, these were the plants that I would see after the old fire, where there would just be a little bit of scorching and the whole rest of the oak would be green. That was a conversion experience for me. Engelmann oak, a nice, tidy, small street tree size oak. Unless it's really old. And then again, our flame height idea. So we have our meadow over here, our zone 1, and then we transition to our low ground cover plants, of which California has lots, fortunately for us. And so a small tour through manzanitas. The fire department does not like manzanitas, but their reasoning is not about its flammability. Their reasoning is that while it's hard to start burning, it will keep burning and the roots burn underground, which means that the fire department can think it's out and their fire personnel can be endangered by that. And so this is why they don't like it. So you have to, yes. Yeah, so they're not all resprouters, but they're beautiful and they come in lots of low flavors. And John Durley is, I think, one of the most beautiful ones, and it grows in clay, just for those of you who have clay. Carmel Sur, perfectly flat, honestly. And so could be, I feel, closer to the house if you are willing to water it. Little Sur, also available. Emerald carpet, that's really a more Northern California. You have to pour as much water as you would a lawn on this plant, but some people love it. Wayside, this is one of my go-to plants because sun, shade, wet, dry, not too tall. And the red stem. Vandenberg, I have never seen a really pretty one of this. Okay, as you can see, that's not even my picture. The Uva ursis, I put this one in because it's a nice tidy one, but the Uva ursis don't grow as well in Southern California as they do everywhere else. That circumboreal thing. And then there's a couple low artemisias. Montara is one of my favorites. Hard to find, but it's beautiful. And Canyon Gray, which is You can find it at any plant sale. Right next to the John Durley, no, right next to Bruce Dickinson buckwheat for a twofer right there. Then Pigeon Point is the lowest of the coyote brushes, but there's a couple other ones. Here's Twin Peaks #2, really great slope holding plant. I mean, they can be fully modified. You can hedge them if you like. Here they are, you know, right at the wooey almost. And then this one, I shouldn't show it because you can't find it. Okay. But all those pups. Okay, so then Berberis, Aquifolium repens. This is just an industrial plant. It will grow anywhere. Sun, shade, wet, dry, does not care. It has pretty yellow flowers, and it would be one of my go-to plants for this kind of situation. And so we're looking for not an even low thing, but a up and down low thing to slow the embers down. Inker Bay Ceanothus, Rusty Dawn Ceanothus. This is a meadow at Rancho that I think it didn't live till now, but it's cute. Centennial, that one really needs to be on the east or north side. Joyce culture is supposed to be one of the easiest ones, and it has been for me. Yankee Point is, of course, the new ivy, and we're all happy about that. Okay, there's days when I think, could they not have done better? But no, they can't. This is as good as they can do, and we're glad. Then silver carpet aster, very flat. I mean, I rather go with the local aster, but you know, that's just me. But yeah, can be in a parkway. Dana Point buckwheat, another one of the low buckwheats. Bruce Dickinson at Eaton Canyon in that zone 2 around the structure. Theodore Payne, that one, it roots along its length, and that's really its only good thing. And then Iva, if you have clay, Iva is a really great plant. It is spreading, it can be watered, it will grow in clay. Right, okay, and Arlie says it will grow in clay or sand or anything. Ribes viburnifolium is a great plant for under oaks. Here it is. This was right next to a sycamore, and the sycamore died, so I can't take that picture again. Terrasica sage, I feel like this one is also almost too big, but some people just love it. And Point Sal purple sage. So, and here we have, again, in a fire zone, but everything here is pretty low, and there's a meadow around the house. And then some more salvias, Bee's Bliss, Mrs. Beard, another one of my favorites, but she will not grow in clay because she gets verticillium wilt if her roots are too wet. But she's pretty. And Dare's Choice. So we do not want to really do this, but this is my only picture of this, and I thought it was cute. They're closer to town in La Cañada. They're not off in the hills. So I felt it was doable. But it's a nice drapey thing, and it's a nice tidy size, unlike a lot of the other ground cover sages. So this is not the growing up here. It's these drapey things down here. So that's it. And I will take questions, and I'll escape from here and stop the share so people can see my face. And unless I need to go back. So do we have any questions online or? Okay, so we have another question in the back. It will be on YouTube. Well, it's not on YouTube right this minute, but it will be uploaded within about 10 days.
Well, our website is under construction, so it may be longer. We don't know yet,
Okay, well,
but take Katie. She's got that.
I can,
yeah, Katie does it, and she does it very quickly. So it will be on the website channel for this chapter, which is called Rib San Berdo, RIBSANBERDO.
Orchid,
Yes,
this is Katie. I just want to mention that I can send out on Facebook a post when it's ready to go, but we could also post it on the website.
yes. So
So the website's under construction for a new website, but we can post that information.
Okay.
And whenever you're ready, I have a couple questions.
Yes, okay,
on
great.
Now? Okay.
Let's go
Um,
now and then we'll get to the person in the room after.
Okay, the first question is, do prescribed burns work?
So, um, so, um, burns are really a question for the Northern California forest. And so, so the question was, do prescribed burns work? And so this is a huge topic, and this isn't really a topic that I can address right here. And so prescribed burns in Northern California forests do work. But you have to remember that people are in control of the fire until they touch that lit match to something. And that many disasters have happened because people did prescribed burns that were inappropriate because they thought it would be fun. No, they think they're doing the right thing. They do. But there are some successfuls. Yeah, let's not. It is really too complex for this talk. So I'm not going to talk about it, and but there's many resources for that online. But what it doesn't apply to is us down here in Southern California. It's and okay, well, Arlie says that's not true, but
Another question.
yes, go ahead.
Another question. Ready?
Mhm.
Julie asks, in terms of fire risk, and although they're not native, what are your thoughts about well-established, well-watered, low profile lantana shrubs? And ditto, the same question about Indian hawthorn. And what would be the recommended distance from the house?
I would still put those in zone 2. I don't believe that lantana would be considered a fire resistant plant at all. It has a lot of oil in it. I think if it were still really well watered, you could have it, but it wouldn't be my first choice because it's gonna need more water to be fire resistant than a native plant would need. So the question was, does lantana, well-watered lantana or well-watered Indian hawthorn could be used as in place of any of the plants that the talk is about? And and I would say that most non-native plants need much more water to be hydrated. And so it would not be my first choice. I mean, am I saying you should rip out your landscaping? No, I'm not saying that. Just convert it very slowly. You can, one by one. Start a new shrub. When it gets big enough, take out the old shrub. Okay, any more
That's
questions?
good. I don't have any more
Okay.
questions at this time, but anybody online who wants to put a question in the Q&A.
Yeah.
Thanks, Orchid.
Fire resistance of desert willow, brittle bush, and smoke tree.
Oh, gosh. So, I can't.
Orchid, can you repeat the question, please?
The question is, can I discuss the fire resistance of brittle bush, smoke tree, and desert willow? And I would say I can't.
Do you want me to say something?
So Arlie's gonna say something about that.
Brittle bush can really burn. I mean, okay, and you know, when it puts up lots of inflorescences, it has a lot of dry stems right over the top of the shrub during fire season. So my recommendation is to trim them back before fire season.
Okay, let me repeat that for
And
the
it will
people.
fade. Every plant can burn.
Yeah.
Every plant will burn. Yeah.
So Arlie suggests that brittle bush itself is has a lot that can burn because it produces a lot of dried inflorescences. And the Enselias in general can be cut back really hard, especially towards winter. I would say that your desert willow is about to go dormant. And so I would not really worry about that.
Trim out the dead stuff.
Yeah.
One last thing.
Yeah, sure.
We've got a large smoke tree that is fairly close to the house.
You know, I do not know. And a lot of the true desert plants are not really that fire adapted. Is something to think about.
Doesn't have a lot of dead wood. If it has dead wood, you always just cut it out. It shouldn't be touching your house. You should have it.
It's pretty well watered and it's a healthy plant,
Yeah,
but
so,
it isn't close to the house. Kind of worries me.
yeah, how close?
She likes the shade.
You know,
It depends how close.
I would also, I would keep it watered. I would harden your house first. So we keep thinking that modifying the landscaping is gonna save the house. Do what you can to save the house first. If everyone learns one thing, it's harden your home. You can do this. And then you can put frost check on your plants. You can buy frost check at Home Depot and you can put it on your plants. I don't know if you can put the barricade on there, but you can absolutely frost check them. The only thing is, it's a lot of phosphorus. So it can make weeds sprout faster after the fire. So I mean, basically it's like fertilizer. So so yeah, you can be responsible about having a tree.
How long do the frost check treatments last?
You know, you're gonna have to look that up. I know about the barricade because I have it. The frost check, you have to have an applicator as well. It doesn't come like the barricade with a sprayer. You have to have your own sprayer. Which you can also buy online from Home Depot and have probably in 2 days. So no excuses, everyone. Seriously, if your house burns after this, it's not my fault.
Yeah, so, insurance companies, underwriters
Yes,
are not renewing people's insurance.
Yes. yes,
And they're saying that within 100 feet of the house, all the tree canopies have to be at least 20 feet apart. They're giving
yes.
really crazy, absolute things
Yeah.
without understanding anything about the plan.
Yeah, so what Arlie,
It's really,
so what Arlie is saying is that a lot of this is being driven by the insurance companies who are looking at the oldest ideas about fire control and asking that trees be kept 20 feet apart and limbed up 20 feet. Instead of making sure that there is a green canopy underneath.
and they're also saying that for the slopes that you showed near the
Yes.
house, where you had a continuous growth of different
Yes.
low growing
Yes,
shrubs, they'll say absolutely not, you have to have those in patches.
right,
with
an
distance
isolated
between-
shrub.
and isolate, yeah. or
Yeah.
They won't renew your insurance.
Yeah, so this is really a question of that people who underwrite things don't read the fire science. And it will probably take another 20 years to get them to do that. There are federal rules about that agencies must actually follow the science. But this is a very touchy subject, and so it's kind of one person at a time of re-educating people. And I have thought about taking this talk around to fire councils, but my life is somewhat challenging. So I'm hoping that I can just point them to this YouTube and we could be done.
Maybe we need to organize a session with insurance companies.
Oh my God, wouldn't that be something? Yes. And then we have a question, we have a question in the back.
Because out of the blue, we got a notice from our insurance company. They had looked at a Google Earth photo or something. And had seen trees around our house. And so they said that the trees had to be trimmed so the limbs were at least 10 feet away from the roof line. And it happened to be a plastic on there, which they were concerned about. But they canceled our insurance August 31st.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I've resubmitted, trying to get them to reconsider. In the meantime, I've called 4 insurance companies, and they plug in our address and they say, oh, you're in a high fire zone. You know, we're in Whitcrest. I don't know if you're familiar with Whitcrest.
Yeah.
We live on Dirt Road, which is near John F. Kennedy
Yeah.
School. And I called AAA and I asked them about it, and she said, oh, you're there. And I said, what? because you have open space around you. And I said, of course we do. It's a rural area.
Yeah.
There
Yeah,
were
this is-
2 acre lots and people had animals and this.
So,
this is getting-
so for the people online, one of the participants in the room was saying that the insurance has canceled them for having trees around their house, and that no other insurance will take them on because they have open space, quote unquote, around their house.
See?
And so, so I think a couple things. One is this is going to take legislative action. And so we're not going to get there by going each to our insurance company. That's not how it's going to happen. We would have to organize. And the other thing is to really help people understand, you know, how fire does and doesn't behave. But the last thing is you can be responsible for your house. My partner has the full fire suit. He has the full 100 feet of fire hose. And when the insurance people came to his house, he met them in the fire suit with the fire hose laid out. And they were like, okay, never mind, it's fine. And Arlie has one more thing to say, and
No,
then we're
there's
gonna close
one
it
more
up.
question.
Oh, is there?
Yeah,
Okay.
so, Abby Benson asked, if we don't want to water deeply, water conservation concern, would it be better to do concrete and or rocks around the house in zone 0?
Okay, if you don't water deeply, then yes, it would be better to do concrete or rocks. I like gravel because, you know, it's maintainable. But concrete is also, you know, super easy if you have a good cement mason. But watering deeply, honestly, is more a water saving than any, you know, watering native plants deeply is more water saving than any other choice you could make. There are no other good choices in this concept. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, another question. We have a lot of Vinca major in Arrowhead. Does Orchid have an opinion about that?
Yes, kill.
I don't know if they heard me.
Arlie said that the question is, we have a lot of Vika major in Arrowhead, and I myself have had this because my grandmother is the source of all my problems and many of the good things that I have as well. And so, you know, it looks great because it looks green even when it's desiccated. So that's a problem with the Vinca. The other problem is it does get a lot of brown underneath, and that's a problem with the Vinca. So I really, around my house, I took out the Vinca and I put in strawberry. The strawberry tells me whether it's watered or not. And the strawberry doesn't desiccate without letting me know. And the Vinca can be almost dry, and at which point it will not help you. So you have to be like my neighbors who way overuse the water, but they're my lower neighbors and I never tell them about it. And the strawberries looked at all that water and it said, we're going there. So they have strawberry now too. And, and you can slowly get the Vinca out and replace it with something more fun. Okay,
Another
follow
one
it.
in the chat,
Okay,
if you want,
yes.
I'll answer it.
Yes.
We get a lot of brittle brush here. Is it something we should get rid of?
You know, so I would say instead of thinking about plants as getting rid of them, start planting the plants that you do want in between the other plants. So you want to have continuous, you want growing things on your ground. You do not want bare ground. Honestly, that's the other useful thing that I'm saying today. Try to have different height, well-watered things. And then if you want something else, plant it between the other things. You can hack that brittle brush down very low and make room for the other things. But don't pull it out. It's making soil, it's fixing carbon. You probably drove somewhere today. So, okay, don't go there, Orchid. That's another talk. Okay.
I went to a neighborhood meeting, I live in Woodcrest,
Yes,
a big group of people, and I took a list of our resistant native plants and
Mhm.
suggestions. Only one person had any interest at all because I kind of pushed the information on. What are
yes.
we doing to get people's awareness that this is a huge problem?
You know,
Nobody in the neighborhood cared, and
um, I would start with my immediate neighbors and I would praise them for watering. And then, and try to get them to also have fire gel. Then the next thing is that there are federal grants. There's federal money for fire councils to harden houses. And we care less about the landscaping. There's federal money available through the state of California for neighborhoods and fire safe councils. And you want that money to come and have the contractors all around, take every house around you and box in the eaves. That's what you want. Don't worry about the planting. You're not going to change their mind. What you want them to do is harden the house. Make fun of them for having a house shaped like a Girl Scout fire. They're smart enough to figure it out if you tell them, but they're not going to go this far into the woods. They're not coming into the woods. You have to start with their house. Start with what size wood they're using. Start with metal railings. Start with fire safe vents. There's money to pay for this. And if one person does it, the next person's like, wait, you got free money to do what? People love free money. Okay, one more question.
Over the course of 30 years I've been at my house, we don't have any lawn except in our backyard where we use it
Yeah,
for recreation. But our front yard is mulched with mostly natives, and is the mulch that is consistent pretty much throughout the yard. Is that an issue?
that is not an issue.
Okay.
You need your plants to be mulched because it's the only way they can stay healthy, really. So I would choose, if I were in the fire zone, I would choose the redwood mulch as the mulch. And the mulch will degrade slowly, and so you just put the redwood on top of it. You don't have to take away the old mulch. Okay, are there any more questions?
There's another question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Says, please say more about the federal money available to harden houses, how to access.
Okay, the only thing I know is that you can't access it directly. You have to get it through a fire safe council. So you have to join your fire safe council, then you have to find the kind of person that finds that stuff out and point them in the right direction. But I know that legislation exists, and it started out as a pilot program, and I know that they expanded the pilot program. So I'm sorry, in the past, I would have probably put this in the handout, but it's not there. Any more questions? Are we winding? One more question.
Needing consultations?
I do, yes. Yeah, I'm not taking on new projects, but I do consulting. Yeah. Okay, then we got lots of things, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah, so, if there are no more questions,
Yes.
I'd just like to thank Orchid for a really interesting, informative presentation.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, well, we can let you relax now, because it's 11:30.
Oh my God. I knew it was gonna be end.
All right, so we can have Katie shut down, I think.
Yeah.
So